this cruel irony that, you're ostensibly trying to write what would be your favorite book if you picked it up in the store, but you're the only person on earth who's like unable to actually read it. In some ways, being a writer under lockdown is a lot like being a writer under normal circumstances. You have, assuming you don't have kids to take care of who are running around driving you crazy. But I think, I have time to sit at my desk and work just like I did before. But the thing that you miss is this sense of coincidence and strange happenings in the world, where you might be walking down the street and you see something that gives you an idea, or you have an interaction with a friend that gives you an idea. Because we can't really go out, it's hard to sort of take inspiration from the outside world, so to speak. So my writing practice is much like it was before, but I'm really missing the feeling of being in the world and taking inspiration from things in the world. I do. I was just recently out of college and living in a really tiny apartment in Ridgewood, Queens, where I could stick my hands out and touch both walls of the room. It was that small. And out of my window, there was this construction site, and all they were doing every day was digging a giant hole in the ground. And this was at a time in life, where I'm just trying to figure out what to do with my life, how to be a writer, but also how do I make money? Is there an ethical way to make money and live in the world with some degree of comfort? Or are my friends who are going off to do, to make good money in banking or whatever industry, like, are they doing it right? Are my friends who are doing Teach for America and other volunteer work, are they doing it right? What am I doing? I'm not really doing anything. And I remember looking out the window at this giant hole in the ground and deciding to start to write about a young woman who was in a similar situation to me, who lived in a tiny apartment in Queens and had this construction site outside her room. And it was kind of a way for me to work through just those post-college feelings of not knowing what to do and how to live an ethical life once you're sort of released into the world. But from there, it spun out into this broader family story that I could never have predicted the scope of, because at the time it was just based on my sort of humble circumstances at age 23. Yeah, the title, I think what I liked about it was, depending on which character you were thinking about, it could take on a different resonance on a spectrum from very sincere to very ironic. Maggie wants to be an altruist very badly. But she has all of these contradictions. She steals from people. She can be a very selfish person. Arthur also wanted to be an altruist in a way when he goes on his ill-fated mission to Zimbabwe. Ethan has a moment of altruism late in the book with his ex-boyfriend. And then you have Francine, who never tried to outwardly label herself an altruist, but who through her work as a therapist and her role as a mother and wife was kind of the most altruistic character at heart. So for me, it was about exploring different facets of how to be a good person. And each character is either trying to be an altruist and failing, or not trying to be an altruist and succeeding. But yeah, it was kind of like each character was a way to look at that question from a different angle. I was very much thinking about the kind of literary characters I grew up reading and loving in books by Philip Roth, Saul Bellow, John Updike, characters who were really, in a lot of ways, badly behaved, and who sort of would feel out of date today, but who I took so much pleasure in reading. And I wanted to see what it would be like to take a person like that, a character like that, and see what they would look like in our modern day times. Like you say, there's all these cultural shifts and talk of political correctness and the whole concept of wokeness. I thought there'd be a lot of comedy in watching a character like that try and sort of fail in some ways to adapt to this new world, which I think for a lot of us is we're all struggling to adapt or catch up or correct for our pasts in a way. So yeah, I think the sort of angry white male, struggling against the current cultural tide, I thought there would be a lot of humor there for sure. Yeah, humor is incredibly important to me. In some ways, for me, it's the most important thing. I have trouble even reading novels that are like completely devoid of humor. And I think my definition of humor is pretty broad. I think Tolstoy's funny. I think Flaubert is funny. Like, I'm not trying to be really narrow about how I see, like, if an author's not cracking a joke 3 times a page, they're not funny. But my worldview is so pegged to just a sense of the world as like a funny, sad place that it's hard for me to engage with art that takes itself or the world so seriously that there's no room for humor. It's like there's no room to breathe almost. But yeah, I think it comes easy, I suppose, to write jokey lines or funny descriptions or funny characters. But what's much more difficult for me is knowing what kind of humor is appropriate where. I don't want my books to feel like, I want them to be funny novels, but I don't want them to feel like I'm up on a stage like a stand-up comedian, like sweating, just trying to get a laugh at any expense. You have to be true to who the characters are as people and where the plot is going. So it's less for me about like writing jokes or funny lines and more about trying to find which jokes or funny lines actually fit the characters and the mood and the moment. That's the big challenge for me, more so than coming up with it in the first place. Yeah, so it was funny. They sent me 2 men's voices, basically, and they said, pick one of these 2. And they were both very good. But it was funny because, the book has multiple points of view. So there's a middle-aged man, a middle-aged woman, a millennial man, and a millennial woman. But the audiobook producer said to me, we're really hearing this book in the voice of a middle-aged man, which was funny for me also because I've been told since I was in, grade school that have the heart and soul of an old person. But it was just funny. They said, we have to have a middle-aged man reading this book. And I really like this one guy's voice, and I think he did a terrific job. But I can't listen to the whole thing. It's sort of like, you kind of write the book that you want to read, but you can't actually read it because by the time you're finished writing it, you've read it over passages so many times. And it's sort of like this cruel irony that, you're ostensibly trying to write what would be your favorite book if you picked it up in the store, but you're the only person on earth who's like unable to actually read it. But I've listened to clips of the audiobook, and it's fun and strange and surreal to hear this guy read something I wrote. Yeah.